Good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. A lot of information, a lot of news ahead. We've got Bryan Dean Wright, a former CIA operations officer, joining us at 3:30. We're going to get into all of the latest headlines about how the CIA has been interfering into the probes into Hunter Biden. Why is that? Bryan Dean Wright will help explain that. Adam Brandon is here at 4 o'clock, president of Freedom Works, to react to the House's passage of a gigantic spending bill today, $1.2 trillion. Mark Morgan joins us at 5 o'clock. We talk about the ongoing invasion at the border. And at 5:30, Congressman Bob Good joins us, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, one of the Republicans to vote against that spending package today. So much chaos on Capitol Hill. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. And just off the top of my head, just thinking of all the headlines we have today, we've got a $1.2 trillion spending package going out the door. If you were listening to Dan Bongino here in the last hour, you probably heard the breaking news that Congressman Mike Gallagher has announced that he is retiring early. He was already not going to finish out. He was already going to retire, but he's now not going to finish out his time in Congress. He's leaving in mid-April from that position. That would bring the Republican majority down to just one vote majority now, thanks to that move. Selfish move. And then we've got, obviously, all the concerns about what's happening at the border. El Paso, Texas, we have people, military-age males, pouring across our border. And as far as I've been able to tell, very little attention within Washington about this. The media has all but ignored that. Very few news outlets have talked about it. The White House today has finally responded to it, kind of. We'll get into that coming up. Also breaking in the last hour or so, there is a terror attack of some kind going on in Russia, in Moscow. At least a dozen people, according to The Guardian, have been wounded. Many more killed, they should say. This is a typo here. Many more wounded, according to unofficial reports, in the worst terror attack in Russia in years. Gunmen in combat fatigues opening fire and detonating explosives, they claim, inside of a big concert hall in Moscow. Photos are showing the Crocus City Music Hall engulfed in flames. There's videos. You can see these videos emerging from the concert hall attack. And there are at least 4 gunmen. And if you see the videos that are going around the internet right now, they are walking very slowly through this concert venue, through the entrance of it, through the concert venue itself, and just mowing people down over and over. Now, the press here says automatic weapons. Who knows? It looks like they're firing a shot at a time. It doesn't look so fast as not being able to pull the trigger on each fire. But regardless, you've got Russians absolutely terrorized right now. And if this is, the Wall Street Journal's Yaroslav Trofimov is a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal covering Russia. He says that Russian state media is reporting that at least 40 people have now been killed in this ongoing attack in Moscow, and that Russian military correspondents are quoting witnesses as saying the attackers there are, quote, men with beards and in body armor and of what they refer to as Oriental appearance. But right here in parentheses, they say Russian for Caucasus or Central Asia. There have been quite a few Islamist attacks in Russia through the years. That could be what this is. But again, we'll give you updates as we get them. And then, of course, you hear the news breaking just in the last few minutes as well, that Kate Middleton, Princess Catherine, the future Queen of England, is now finally public with an explanation as to what's going on with her health. She has been out of the public eye. We knew that she had an abdominal surgery. There was a photo that she apparently released, or at least she took credit for, having photoshopped it. It was distributed around the planet of her alongside of her boys. And then people started looking at the photo and going, this isn't right. There's all sorts of mistakes all in this that look like somebody photoshopped. And sure enough, she took the credit for that. She took the blame for it and said that was my fault. And all of the wire services began rescinding the distribution of that photo, saying it was inauthentic. It wasn't real. And of course, that led to a huge just array of conspiracy theories about what's going on with her. She is now saying that as a result of the abdominal surgery, after they completed it, she says it was successful, but they detected cancer cells in the process, and now she's being treated for chemotherapy. And the reason, she says, that they took time to share this information is because they wanted to make sure to tell their children first, and convey it to them in a way that they would understand, and to encourage them, ensure them that she's feeling stronger with each passing day, and that things are going to be okay. So that's just a series of rapid fire updates here on everything that's going on in the world. Now let's dive in a little deeper. El Paso, Texas, yesterday. We get the images of hundreds of military-aged males pouring across the border and smashing through the Texas National Guard. And it's left most of us reeling. Now, for a moment yesterday, there was some expectation, some hope at least, that maybe Republicans would gather together and tap the brakes on a gigantic funding bill that only sustains the Department of Homeland Security, which is betraying us. But they weren't able to stop it today. They weren't able to stop it. Not enough Republicans were anyway. And that bill passed the United States House of Representatives today. More on that coming up. But as it relates to El Paso, questions have abounded. How's the left going to deal with this, if at all? How's the White House going to deal with this, if at all? I said yesterday, these are mandatory questions for the White House. These are not optional. You have to ask about the invasion of your country when military-aged males are pouring across it and fighting with members of our military as they do. That has to come up, doesn't it? Well, it did come up today, courtesy of my friend and colleague, Reagan Reese, over at the Daily Caller. She asked this question. And trust me, I was urging her. I said, you've got to ask the White House about this. And sure enough, she did. And here's the statement that the White House gave her this morning. They say this: we are grateful for the Border Patrol's quick work to get the situation under control and apprehend the migrants, they say. But then they go on. When the former president, referring to Trump, told congressional Republicans to block the bipartisan border security agreement, he said to blame him for it. Well, he got his wish, and the result was chaos after Governor Abbott's Operational Lone Star and Razor Wire were overrun yesterday. While we cannot comment on individual cases, anyone who does not have a legal basis to remain in the United States is promptly removed, the White House spokesperson claimed. So did you hear what they did there? Here you have a Biden administration under whom the border is in complete chaos, under whom these very actions by these foreign nationals have been encouraged. And these illegals, when they cross into the country, they've been thanking Biden for opening the border so that they could pour in. So if there's anyone to blame here in terms of who's in charge, it's Biden. It is not Donald Trump who's in charge, unfortunately, right now. It is not Donald Trump. And the White House, cartoonishly, is out today saying it is Trump's fault that we all saw those images yesterday of people pouring across the border. Now, just a few moments ago, this was asked during the live White House press briefing. Some other reporter asks, and here's how Corinne answered. Now, she's dancing a little bit away from this blame Trump mentality. This is insane that they even bothered with it, but they're brazen. This is the way they operate. It's Trump's fault that people are pouring across the border. No, it's Biden's. Here's Corinne a moment ago.
Has the president seen that dramatic video of migrants surging past National Guardsmen in Texas and El Paso?
I mean, look, I have not spoken to the president about that video. What I can say is this, I really truly believe that's a question for, the Republican governor of Texas, right?
What?
This is something that he should address.
What?
That he should actually speak to.
So just a few weeks ago, the Biden administration was cutting open the very concertina wire that these guys just blasted through yesterday. The White House has been, the Biden administration has been a part of an effort to enable this very invasion. And they've got the cojones to stand up there and say, take it up with Greg Abbott. That's a question for him. How you deal with illegals. I guess in a sense it is, because the White House is just not doing it. So if you want to ask about border enforcement, ask about some of the only people who are actually attempting it. That would be down in Texas. But she says this is a Texas problem, not an us problem.
The Republican governor of Texas, right? This is something that he should address, that he should actually speak to. The president has worked with Congress in the Senate, as I just spoke to, about getting an immigration bill done, making sure that we deal with the border challenges
They back to challenges. They called it a crisis for like 8 seconds.
That we're now seeing, and you have a governor of Texas who has continued to politicize this.
He's been politicizing it. So Greg Abbott has been trying to secure the border. You, on the other hand, and the merry band of idiots that compiled that piece of legislation in the Senate, have been working to grant amnesty to foreign nationals. That's what that legislation did. So this whole thing about like, oh, blame Trump for stopping the legislation. No, credit Trump. To the extent that he had a hand in stopping that legislation, credit him. He deserves credit for that. Because if that thing became law, it would have made things worse. It would have accelerated work permits. It would have created a magnet for more people, even more people, to pour into the country, millions of them. It would have given money to sanctuary cities to continue to underwrite their betrayal of our sovereignty. That is all part of that legislation. It is not in any meaningful sense border security. It was entirely designed to aid and abet the invasion. So, you know, if you're, I don't know, are you sick of this yet? Are you sick of all of the lies, the brazen projection, the inversion of the truth, the constant cascade of lies that come out of the mouths of all these people? And even in the face of video evidence, they've just decided, well, it's always Trump's fault. If it's something people don't like, it's Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault. So that's the message out of the White House today. And so Republicans had every incentive in the world not to fund the Department of Homeland Security today, not to sprint out some of the dumbest possible funding you can imagine. And yet they did. So many Republicans today joining hands with Democrats to pass an absurd spending bill. Just give you a sense of some of the crazy things that were in this. Here is Jesse Waters on the Fox News Channel running through those details last night.
There's an old saying, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Well, this morning at 2:23, Congress released a monster 1,012-page bill with a $1 trillion price tag. They're rushing to pass the bill before you have a chance to read it. Why? Well, because it's full of pork. And we've been digging through it, and here's what you're paying for. Liz Warren is spending $850,000 on a gay senior citizen home in Boston. Florida has the villages, Massachusetts has the village people. We're spending $15 million to pay for Egyptians' college tuition. Egyptian tuition, not Egyptians who live in America, Egyptians in Egypt. Egyptian tuition. So we pay for illegals to go to college here, and now we're paying for the tuition before I guess they even cross the border. Speaking of Egypt, Gold Bar Bob's sending $400,000 to a gay activist group that teaches elementary school kids about being trans. Not enough to keep you out of jail, Gold Bar. Sorry. Another $400,000 goes to a group that gives clothes to teens that help them hide their gender, like chest binders and tuckums. Parental permission not required. Even Dianne Feinstein, who unfortunately passed away long before the bill was written, has an earmark from the grave. $500,000 for a DEI zoo. The San Diego Zoo's getting $500,000 for an anti-racist nature appreciation program where high school kids from diverse backgrounds can observe wildlife. Why do they need $500,000 to go to the zoo? Tickets are like $15. That should be enough for every congressman, especially the Republicans, to vote no, but
they did. So they voted for it. Members of the House Freedom Caucus voting against it today. In a moment, I'm going to share some audio of Congressman Bob Good, who will join us later in the show to discuss this very thing and his reaction to the decision to pass this horrific spending package today with almost no time for anybody to look at it. Those are just some of the details we found out about.
And $3 billion more for the Department of Homeland Security. This DHS under Mayorkas and Biden that continues to perpetrate this invasion on the American people. We have entered a new era when it comes to the border invasion, a new era yesterday. Many of you, I hope, saw the video that we saw, where at first we thought, is this a third world country? Is this a banana republic? When we saw the alien mob rush, the bum rush of border officials to force their way into this country. How have we got to that point today where we are allowing illegal aliens to bum rush border officials and force their way into the country? And yet the Biden administration's response, is it to ramp up efforts to repel the invasion? No. Their intention is to prevent Texas from securing their border. They will go to unlimited lengths to prevent Texas from securing their border and keeping their citizens safe.
Congressman Bob Good will be joining us coming up later in the program, 5:30, and he and the Freedom Caucus guys were opposed to this. In fact, the final tally was 286 to 134 today. 101 Republicans and all but 22 Democrats supporting passing this legislation. Democrats, in other words, very pleased with this, and a whole bunch of Republicans went along with them. There's a guy who goes by Swamp Glossary on X, and he posted a video of how Republicans go through the thought process here. He said the Freedom Caucus guys, they just vote no against this stuff. And then the rest of the Republicans, well, listen to him explain. He's using a marker, and he's showing how they get to their answers. Take a listen.
How the GOP plans to vote on the Swamp Omnibus. House Freedom Caucus, no. Swampy Republicans. I take a back seat to no one when it comes to being conservative. We have the slimmest majority. We gotta respect the process. Wait until after the elections to fight. We can only hit singles, not grand slam. We can't be a circular firing squad. We gotta clear the decks for the next election. But then we're gonna fight tooth and nail. I can't tell you what's in the skip, but it's bad. Yes.
Well, that about sums it up, doesn't it? I think I've heard a lot of that before. Yeah, the House Freedom Caucus, no. Swampy Republicans. It's a long way to get to yes. And they do. They seem to, each time. Look, even if you could justify this bill, you've got to release it with time for us to stare at it. They didn't even do that. It's betrayal after betrayal. Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, filed a motion to vacate today for Mike Johnson. She's had bad enough out of that guy. And I think there's a lot of people who are with her. It's amazing what's happening. Bryan Dean Wright is going to be with us in mere moments. We'll talk to him about the CIA's involvement in protecting the Bidens. How's that happening? Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:36 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Adam Brandon joins us from FreedomWorks. We'll talk about this mammoth spending package just slammed through the House today. 5 o'clock, Mark Morgan talks to us about the border invasion, shocking images, and a shocking response from the White House today. And then Bob Good, the congressman, is here at 5:30 with an inside look at what's going on inside Congress, which is as chaotic as ever. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Raging Cajun James Carville is a crazy person, and he's been on TV lately saying a lot of crazy stuff. Here's some of the latest.
President Biden is not the best attack politician I've ever seen in my life, and I'll leave it at that. But there are a lot of people to do what I call, quote, the wet work, unquote. And I think like he needs to stay sort of a... Well, it's kind of, but it's a paid TV and stuff like that. But yes, a CIA term. You take a guy out. But he doesn't need to do the wet work. People like me and other groups in the party need to do that. He's not very good at it. I don't think people want to hear from that. And he can cruise along here at a better altitude. But this has got to be done, and they got a precious advantage right now.
There you go. So a well-known, powerful Democrat operative fantasizing about, quote, taking Trump out, doing the, quote, wet work. It's a CIA term for a hit on a guy. For more on what the hell is going on, well, I want to bring in Bryan Dean Wright, a former CIA operations officer and the host of the Wright Report broadcast. He joins us now. Hello, Bryan. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Is it weird to hear a guy like James Carville say on TV that it's time to, undertake some wet work against Donald Trump?
Yeah, he doesn't exactly look like one of my former colleagues. Doesn't look like a CIA guy. But hey, who knows now? Things are changing at Langley these days. Less than 1 week ago, I believe it was Mr. Trump who used the word bloodbath, and he got a lot of heat for that. People talking about how rhetoric is awful and terrible. Now we've got this guy talking about institutions using CIA terms. So the party, groups of folks who hate bad rhetoric, are actually kind of okay with it, depending on who they're shooting it at, I guess. That's the lesson there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting he brings up the CIA because we keep finding out evidence that it appears the CIA is actually actively involved in doing at least some election meddling here in the United States of America. There was a report yesterday that a new whistleblower has come forward to Congress alleging that the Central Intelligence Agency has been interfering in federal investigations into the Biden family. The whistleblower alleging that the CIA intervened in August of 2021, this would be well into Biden's presidency, to prevent IRS investigators from interviewing the guy who's paying off all of Hunter Biden's tax debts. That would be Kevin Morris. Is it typical for the CIA to get involved in domestic investigations?
Yes and no, but mostly no. So let's talk about what probably happened here. This Morris guy is out wherever he is in the country. He is probably an asset. So he is either providing cover services for the CIA, that is to say, housing other agents or assets, or he himself is an asset or an agent. And if that's the case, either way, he is collecting money. And if the IRS is coming to his door, knocking on it, saying, hey, we want to talk to you about money and how you're loaning it out to guys like Hunter Biden, well, he probably called up what's called his handler, the operations officer, guys like me, and says, I got the IRS and the DOJ knocking on my door. You want to deal with this? Because they're going to ask questions and I can't answer them. So that's what I expect happened in this case. That means that his handler went back to Langley and said, look, we got a problem. And this went all the way up to what's called the seventh floor, which would be the CIA director, William Burns. Of course, that is a Biden appointee. So now we got a Biden appointee deciding if Joe Biden and his family should be investigated, just like we do at the Biden FBI and the Biden DOJ. So this is when it should become a little bit alarming to most of us to say, we have reasonable allegations to want to continue to investigate this family, Mr. Biden and his son Hunter, and yet we have one more three-letter agency who's getting involved and thwarting it at some level. So that's the allegation. I could see it happening. And there has got to be a very, very long trail to this in terms of it being documented in emails and cables.
So if the CIA is actually actively meddling in a DOJ investigation like this, that's the red flag that came up for you. You think Kevin Morris is likely then an asset of the CIA?
I would guess that that's the case, yes.
Okay. So it's not, and it's also, as I mentioned, not the first time that the CIA has popped up in the Hunter Biden coverage. The New York Post had a story some time ago about how the CIA was, you had active members of the CIA who were involved in signing off on the letter that was involved with those 51 former intelligence agents who were making the claim that the Hunter Biden laptop was merely Russian disinformation. In fact, the Post reported at the time the CIA conspired with the former acting director, Mike Morell, and the Biden campaign to produce that letter, falsely claiming that the emails from Hunter Biden's laptop were Russian disinformation. Again, why would the CIA be involved in drafting a letter with political consequences here in the United States?
Well, that is just straight up propaganda. Those folks who are all affiliated with either the Democrat Party or Mr. Biden or Hillary Clinton or just simply hated Donald Trump, they engage in an attack on this country. Let's be very, very honest about that. That letter was an assault on the nation. They knew precisely what they were doing, which is they were using the smear of having worked at the CIA and so forth to say, hey, we have inside information about this laptop, or we have inside information about the Trump-Russia collusion story, and just trust us that we know what we're doing and that there's really, really bad stuff about Trump-Russia, and there's nothing to worry about regarding this laptop. That, of course, is election interference. They knew precisely what they were doing. It was an assault on the country because they did not want Trump to win, and they got their way. They buried a major story that should have been incredibly important for all Americans, which is that we likely have someone in the White House who's compromised by foreign powers.
But at the time, and even until this very day, so many of them hide behind the idea that, oh, well, we were all retired from government service, therefore you can't blame the intel community for this. But as the Post pointed out at the time, you had Mike Morell, the former CIA director, going to the CIA's pre-publication classification review board, called the PCRB for short, and telling them he needed a rush job in order to get this talking point out. And they happily obliged to get this talking point out right in the middle of the campaign, designed to suffocate the coverage of how the Biden family was making its money.
Yeah. They called in a favor, and they got it.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what the goal was. And that just underlines the point and the fear, I think, the reasonable fear of most Americans, which is to say, we've got a bunch of folks at the Bureau, at the agency, the NSA, who are deciding that they know what's best for America, and they're going to act on it irrespective of your vote or your preferences. It is they who will guide the nation forward, not you. And that is the horrifying reality that we know is not just a conspiracy theory. Of course, Senator Chuck Schumer went on Rachel Maddow's show years ago and said that 6 ways to Sunday is what the intel community can do to get back at politicians. But we know that it's real, and we're seeing example after example of the fact that it is real, and it's awful.
Yeah, I'm going to play some audio, I think, coming up in the program. But I was curious if you got a chance to see Mike Benz, the cybersecurity expert, the guy making claims about how he thinks that actually the Hunter Biden story really is a story about the CIA's involvement in Ukraine. Have you seen this?
I did see the clip, yeah.
And what do you think of that allegation that what's happening here is not that they're just merely covering up for the Biden family in terms of how they're making money, but that there may have been CIA involvement in trying to reorient the Ukrainian energy industry towards NATO and away from Russia, and that's what they're trying to cover up here?
You know, anymore, I would have told you 5-10 years ago that I wouldn't have believed it to be true.
Yeah.
But now, after we've had 2 special counsel reports, we've had an Inspector General report from the DOJ, talking about lawlessness at the FBI, talking about lack of strict fidelity by the IC. Anything is now possible. I don't trust any of them, and I think if we had thoughtful oversight in the House and the Senate, they would be digging into this stuff. It is a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate fear, and it ought to be investigated. But sadly, I don't know who's going to do that at this point. Our House and Senate are so dysfunctional.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. All right, let me move to some other issues then, which is, you know, there've been a couple of lefties, powerful lefties, who've got their hands in the intelligence community, making claims lately that as the nominee for the Republican Party, Donald Trump is entitled to security briefings. But folks like John Brennan and Adam Schiff say that the intel community should mislead Trump about the extent of intelligence, that they should downplay what they actually know. Here's John Brennan making this claim recently.
I have to start with the news today with you, Director Brennan, that some version of our intelligence analysis will, there's a plan for Trump to start getting that while he's under criminal prosecution for mishandling classified documents. Will you explain what this is and what you think is likely to happen?
Yeah, Nicole, it's somewhat surreal that an individual who is under indictment for mishandling classified information is going to be getting classified intelligence briefings. But this traditionally is provided to the candidates for president by the sitting president. And so therefore, I think it makes sense for the Biden administration to offer that to Donald Trump. Now, I'm pretty certain that my former intelligence colleagues will provide briefings that are not going to do any type of damage to sources and methods in terms of providing information to Donald Trump that he could misuse. But they will provide analytic overviews and briefings about some of the world's hotspots. Letting Donald Trump know what the assessments are at this point. So I think it's going to be analysis that will be devoid of the sources and methods, the sensitive things that we are most concerned about, the types of things that were in all those documents that he had in the bathroom and other areas in Mar-a-Lago. But I do think it makes sense. Now, it's a question about whether or not Donald Trump will accept the briefings. And I'm sure that if he does accept them, he probably will disparage them, as he has disparaged U.S. intelligence officers as well as U.S. intelligence itself for so long, over so many years.
I'll spare you having to listen to Adam Schiff, but he made the same claim on television. And basically what these men are saying is that Donald Trump should be given a deceitful briefing, should be given a handicapped briefing that a candidate would otherwise be entitled to. What do you make of that?
Well, 2 things. Again, this just underlines the fact that the deep state, the administrative state, is real, and it continues to attack the voters out there who want to choose whomever they want. If they're not good enough in the eyes of John Brennan, then they're going to do what they got to do. So that is the most important piece. The deep state is real. Second, Brennan is saying this as Joe Biden is under investigation. In fact, we know now he had classified information going back to the 1970s in his garage next to his weed whacker. So you can't tell me that we have this equal set of rules in Washington, that Joe Biden is getting not only this daily brief, but he's demonstrated over the years that he is irresponsible in terms of his handling of not only intel, but the classified sources and methods. So if we want to have a one set of rules, that's fine. Make sure they apply to everybody. What's clear is that in Brennan's eyes, they only apply to a guy like Trump or Republicans, people that he doesn't like. That is the issue. Either we have rules for everybody or we have rules for nobody, and it's now anarchy. And that's really what we've got. We've got a place like a Pakistan or an Egypt where we've got these intel agencies and military officers running the country with this veneer of democracy. That's the moment in which we live.
Yeah, and the other piece, Brandon mentioned it at the end that, Donald Trump may not even want to accept these briefings. And if I was in Trump's shoes, I might be inclined to take that position, not to take briefings from an intel community that has worked so actively against me in the past. I mean, if you look at both the Trump campaign as well as Senators Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley, there have been allegations throughout that the intel community has given briefings as a predicate to leak information to the press about the conversations that they're having with those candidates. And in fact, the intel community was actively spying on Trump and his campaign during the briefings of the Trump campaign. So this is all the more reason that you may want to actually reject receiving intel briefings, don't you think?
I think that's a fair argument, and I think what a person might want to do if indeed Trump wins the presidency, wait until he becomes the president, fire most of the senior leaders at the CIA and others, put in his own team, and then get caught up on all the latest intel as well as sources and methods, because that is the safest way that you're going to be able to handle this, what is now a threat within your own intel community. I think it's a reasonable position, and I think the president would be smart to consider it.
All right. Bryan Dean Wright, again, former CIA operations officer and the host of the excellent Wright Report Podcast. Sir, thank you very much for your time today.
Of course.
Good to talk to you. My thanks again to Bryan Dean Wright for coming on with us. I was talking recently with Mike Benz, the Foundation for Freedom Online, a guy who knows all about the big tech companies and the way they've been meddling in our elections, but also with an eye on how the government's doing that too. And he's got a theory that he's sharing online. I'm going to share a part of it with you about Hunter Biden and why the CIA keeps on getting involved in protecting him.
I just had to break this down in video to make it perfectly plain and clear to people what's happening with Hunter Biden and the CIA. Why was I saying a year and a half ago that the reason Hunter Biden is untouchable by the Justice Department is because he was part of a CIA operation, multiple ones actually? You have to understand what's going on here. Okay, so let me just give you a dozen data points on Hunter Biden CIA. So the first thing is Hunter was on the chairman's advisory board of the National Democratic Institute, the NDI. Okay, the NDI is the DNC wing of the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the top CIA cutout used in our tens of thousands of NGO swarms. NED ranks number one. It was created to be a NGO affiliate of the CIA. It was created to do overtly what the CIA was doing covertly.
By the way, I encourage you watch the video slowly, pause, and then search each thing he says, and it checks out.
Getting in trouble for doing in the 20th century, created under the Reagan administration in 1983. And there's something called the NDI for Democrats and the IRI for Republicans, the CIA wing of the Republican Party. And they both split spoils, basically on U.S. foreign policy jobs that the CIA orchestrates. You don't get to be part of the chairman's advisory committee of the NDI unless you are CIA linked or CIA vetted. It is a CIA. It's a Congo, except it's a Congo, if you will. NGOs, government organized, non-governmental organizations. This is a CIA organized non-Conco, a CIA organized non-CIA organization. Okay, it's the CIA. Okay, and he's on the chairman's advisory board of that. And oh, by the way, when he was at Burisma, who was the other person on the Burisma board from the U.S. there was Cofer Black, who had spent 30 years in the CIA.
Yes.
Cofer Black was Mitt Romney's Sherpa to the intelligence community during his presidential run in 2012. And you know what? Mitt Romney's on the board of the IRI, who I just mentioned, the International Republican Institute, the CIA cutout counterpart to the NDI. Okay.
And he goes on. He talks about, Joe Biden in his time in the Senate, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, very dialed in with the intel community and the CIA. John Kerry's chief of staff ends up working at Burisma as well in this very same time frame. Also, John Kerry, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, CIA. The list goes on and on and on. And so Mike Benz, I thought in a very provocative, interesting video, lays out why there has been such interest in Ukraine by our government through the years, and a lot of credible evidence that the U.S. government was involved in orchestrating the Maidan Revolution in February of 2014. And then, in April, Biden joins the board of the biggest natural gas company in that country, and they're redirecting all of the operations towards NATO. It's all very fascinating. And he says there may be a big interest for the CIA in staying actively involved in covering up all of Hunter Biden's activities. We'll just keep untangling it. We'll just, as we get the details publicly. I encourage you to check that video out. We're going to talk to Mike Benz, though. We're going to have him stop by the show this coming week, and we'll get a more detailed take from him then. Stay with us. Ahead, I've got Adam Brandon from FreedomWorks. He reacts to the $1.2 trillion mammoth spending package just slammed through the Congress today.